And I love that David took us in the direction of behavior and cyber insurance. I had the opportunity to hang out with an insurance professional this morning. And so the conversation that we had went into this great idea about a moral hazard. And so a moral hazard is an idea that a party protected in risk or a party protected from risk in some way will act differently than if they didn't have the protection. And so you think about the idea of cyber insurance and how that affects the behavior of the organization. In the insurance industry, moral hazards occur in very simple terms when insured parties take more risks knowing that the insurer is going to protect them. And so I might drive faster in my car because I know my insurance is going to fix the car if I have an accident. Or I might go skydiving or do something dangerous because I know my health insurance is going to make me whole if I have hospital bills or something else. But when you start putting that in the context of cyber insurance, from the audience's or from the panel's perspective, do you think that companies or organizations or individuals are doing risky things or taking on too much risk because they think that the insurance is going to cover them and they don't really have to worry about good practice, good hygiene, or good behavior because, oh, cyber insurance is going to take care of this? I'll start with you, Barry, and then we'll work backwards so that everybody gets a chance. It also, I know that you work in intellectual property, so this might be closer to what you deal with, but I think it's an interesting concept, kind of tying moral hazard to cyber insurance, to the behavior of organizations and how much risk they're willing to accept.
That's an interesting question, and I admit that I only see a very small sliver of that behavior from outside perspective. I think, at least in my experience, I think that the failures are not on the moral hazard idea that an insurance policy will cover us if something goes wrong, but I think it's organizational awareness. To me, it's organizational awareness that and transparency, communication within the organization. We all get so fixated in our respective departments and categories of expertise when we're developing a new product or a new service or a new branding opportunity on behalf of our company that we're pressing forward with that development. We're excited about that development. We're not thinking about, oh yeah, in order to do this function, we're going to be taking on additional data. We're taking on additional risk that we have to manage and mitigate and control. And so it's incumbent. I often evangelize to my clients that the organization has got to talk cross-function and make sure that security practices, that privacy policies and practices are hygienically consistent and robust, so that things don't fall in the crack that will then expose the company or the organization to these kinds of situations where hopefully they do have the cyber insurance that will come into the rescue. But again, my answer would be that it's probably more a function of just not being mindful holistically of the amount of information and the nature of the information and how it's going to be used that allows the increased exposure and the increased hazard, rather than reliance on outside resources that will come to bear. Again, that's a narrow perspective.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think it's cool that, you're an outside advisor, and then we have Melloney as an inside advisor. Melloney, do you have any thoughts about the concept of moral hazard and the behavior that it drives?
Yeah, I smiled when you said that, because I don't think it's a good idea to run your business based upon your insurance. And the reason why I say that is because if you are only relying upon, well, we can go ahead and let's go ahead and do this because I'm insured by this. Maybe on the consumer end, you can say that, but on a business, you really need to be careful about what you do. There are so many things that can happen. And quite frankly, one of my jobs, shortly after I got there, we had a potential claim. So I had to look at the policy and go through all the exclusions to see whether or not the claim was even covered. Because just because you have cyber insurance doesn't mean that the incident that you're dealing with is covered by your insurance, and it may not be fully covered by your insurance. And so taking the approach that I'm just going to go ahead and do this because I have X amount of millions of dollars of cyber insurance is not a good practice. The insurance company could deny your claim. Your claim may not be 100% covered. There's so many different things that could happen. The claim could be more than what you have insurance to cover and could take you out of business. So it's better to have a more conservative approach and instead look at risk as what are the risks that my company can bear? And what's the likelihood that this risk is going to occur? And how do I mitigate this risk so that even if it does happen, or if there's a possibility, I'm doing things to make sure that the damages that could happen are less. And so if you do all of that, that's the better practice. But then you have insurance so that when you've taken the precautions that you need to take and you have everything in place, if something goes wrong, you have insurance, hopefully to cover you in that event.
That makes a lot of sense. And so at this point, we've heard from outside counsel, we've heard from inside counsel. Chief Justice Melton, if a case came all the way to the Georgia Supreme Court and you had to weigh the merits of the case, if moral hazard came into context and you could give your after action review after the facts. And so we don't want to talk about something that really happened, we're hypothesizing here. But if it was something that came up and the court had to look at a situation where somebody went really out of control simply because they had insurance and it caused harm to other people, how would that influence your decision or the way that you guys evaluate it? And what advice would you give to companies so that they could maybe stray away from that foolishness?
Well, I agree with Melloney. It'd be a horrible way to manage your business. And I really don't know how much of that would play in the psychology of the risk and how the risks are intruded into the workplace. I was on a tech call last week, and this is our tech committee, and we still ask questions such as, what does cybersecurity insurance cover? And so it's still a real question to people outside the insurance world and the cybersecurity world. It sounds like a good idea, but I don't think it's even clear what happens. And to the extent you get a clear idea what cybersecurity insurance does, it's some comfort, but it's not a lot of comfort in that it's not like car insurance where you put your car in the shop and you get a rental car and you keep going about your business. When you get a cybersecurity attack, you're shut down, and yeah, you have insurance, and that just means that a team of people will fly in from wherever and try to mitigate the damage at a reduced cost. But it is a huge intrusion on the operation, even with insurance. There's always this forensics that happens, and where you find who is it that opened up the door, the pathway, and nobody wants to be that person. So I'm not so sure how much insurance gives motivation to just go crazy.
That's fair. Hey, Joe, I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you hear the context about the insurance question?
Well, I heard Melanie comment that you shouldn't run your business based on the insurance that you can get. And I think that's a pretty, as the lawyer in me says, that's actually a really great comment, because you're leaving yourself in the hands of adjusters that may not have any understanding of the underlying business, as well as other litigators who may look at you with a target based on the amount of insurance that you did get versus the actual business that you're in and the actual risk that you pose in the marketplace. So I also think that that's a great idea. I hearken back to one of the things that, again, David said, not because I think that he's a great guy, but more because I think that it just struck something in me to say that folks are out here thinking that they can be insured and thinking that that's one way that they can manage risk in this area. And in fact, there's some companies that are just not providing, or at least even looking at trying to provide insurance in some of this stuff, mainly because they haven't caught up with the technology that's in some of these spaces, but also because the upside of the risk or the evaluation of the risk is just too high for their calculations in their portfolio. And they're not going to put their companies on the line for it. So that poses some interesting questions about how you as a company going into and looking at these scenarios can mitigate risk on your own without having the backing of an insurance policy as a safeguard. I think that that's something that we should all consider.